here again this morning with Pat McGuigan. Thanks again for joining us. So we're talking about Governor Mary Fallin. Why does she want all of her legislative priorities sent to her immediately?
Immediately might be a hasty word, but she did stress it. Monday of this week, she met with both caucus in both the House and the Senate and said, you know, let's get a move on, get this stuff to me. I think there's some sense of urgency on the part of the Republicans to begin delivering on campaign promises. I think voters are pretty tolerant. At the same time, there's always something to be said for a cascading series of successes. And very quickly after her sessions with him, by midweek, the Republicans were processing quite a few significant pieces of legislation, lawsuit reforms, joint several liability, tax clarity on the taxability or not of proceeds from litigation. Then 2 aerospace tax credits that are very important backfill, if you will, to fulfill and carry through on promises made to Boeing for some jobs that are already coming around the bend, and they're good paying jobs. So that's pretty significant. Right after that, perhaps as soon as when people see this, you're going to have a wave of additional legislation, or early next week, we'll see more lawsuit reform measures. I do believe that although it's very controversial and has created some division even among Republicans, that the hard cap on non-economic damages in lawsuits will pass. Workers' compensation, a modest package of workers' comp reforms that retain litigation in the system but make some changes. And then finally, the one-stop licensing, which is a very important initiative of her that's pro-business. Education reforms, package of other proposals that might be a little more challenged would be increasing the executive power over appointments, the health care exchange. That's going to be still a tough one for her. They've actually, the original bill is being pulled back, I believe, even as we speak, and there'll be some kind of a substitute that accommodates some of the concerns. And then finally, the budget. There's actually some differences between her and the Republican leaders on the budget, so that's a very quick outline. Of course, there's a lot more going on. I think it's her and her Republican allies wanting to follow through on things they've talked about, as she put it, for years, and get them done. I really do.
Okay. What about energy policy? There's been some controversy involving President Obama's energy policy, involving some big companies here.
Yes, very interesting sequence of events all this week. Larry Nichols and Harold Hamm, 2 of our leading corporate citizens, if you will, and key players in the natural gas and oil industry, both lambasted the president, sitting right there with one of the president's friends, David Warren, at a conference in Norman, and they were pretty clear. At one point, I made a note, Nichols said, quote, "It's just idiotic to be at war with the fuels we have," close quote. That's kind of tough wording you don't usually use towards a president. Harold Hamm said that if some of President Obama's ideas stay in place to take away some of the tax credits that do benefit the industry, that his company, Continental Resources, would be looking at a 35 to 40% reduction in their operating budget. Now let's assume that that's a little bit of hyperbole, let's say by half, so that would mean 20%. That's a lot. Now, very quickly after that, on Wednesday, the president gave an interesting speech in which he kind of combined together all of his arguably pro-energy, pro-fossil fuel musings, mostly on natural gas, restated his strong support for tax incentives, credits, so forth, for compressed natural gas vehicles. So that was interesting. And he said the caveat on all of this is that he said we want to drill in a way that's safe and environmentally sensitive. Safe and environmentally sensitive. That's a code word for the debate over fracturing, which has been traditionally regarded as a safe technique, but the Obama administration and some of his environmentalist allies are kind of going after that. That was one of the things that Nichols and Hamm also talked about. Very strong disagreement. And we're in an interesting thing because the president has set, like many presidents before him, an objective of being energy independent, or at least more so. And he has set the year 2025 as the objective. The challenge is, how do you do that and keep piling more regulations on the industry and taking away some of the tax credits and incentives? So that's going to be an interesting battle, because there's some appeal nationally to the president's environmental sensitivity. Here, much less so. I remember when David Walters was governor, and he's a fan of Obama, but I remember when he was governor, he talked regularly about the gas and oil rather than oil and gas, the gas and oil industry, and the point he was making is how significant natural gas is to our future.
Interesting. A lot of people will be watching that here for sure.
Yeah, and it has legislative implications for Oklahoma, the state legislature.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us. If you want to check out Pat's news website, just go to CapitolBeatOK.com and you can read a lot more about what he's talking about. We'll see you again next week.